example of some of the emotional abuse was he began to tell me that, reminding me that I didn't have anyone in Texas. Even though I had family there, I did not know them. No one would take my side. No one would believe me. I had an aunt who lived about 45 minutes away, who I wanted to visit on a regular basis. Slowly but surely, he started limiting my time there, whether it would be because he wanted to watch a football game, a basketball game. We'd drive 45 minutes and he'd tell me I only have 20 minutes. Then it went from that to, you can't go see your grandmother at all. And by the time that I realized what was happening, it had gotten to a point where if I stood up and said no, it would lead to physical abuse.
If I was at school too long, because he had a problem with me being at school, he didn't go to school. And I'd be at school doing study groups, and he would call my phone continuously. And if I picked it up, he would, my friends would be like, you need to hang up. He's like yelling at you. And he'd be like, you told me it would take this long, and it's taking this long. And I'm telling him we'll have to study for a test. And he would say, well, are you that stupid that you need to be in school that long? And that was really hurtful. And so there were times if I didn't call or text him back right away, it would just be a big problem.
In this relationship, we stayed together for about almost 3 years. The first year was not so abusive, just because he was dealing with his own personal situations that related to dating someone who was also a minor. Everything was forgiven. So once he finally was out, he came and picked me up. And he wanted to take me out for dinner. And so I remember specifically walking outside of my house, and mind you, I'm a high school student and it's hot, it's the summer. So, I'm wearing shorts and I'm wearing like this nice, shirt. And as, I walked up to the car that, he was in order to pick me up, he was like, are you really going to wear that? And I said, yeah, what's wrong with it? And he said, you look like a kid. And because of my background situation, you have to look more of an adult. And so that's the beginning stages of him being abusive, just controlling what I wore. I always had to look 21. I always had to look old enough to get into club, bars, and I was at that age, 15, 16. I was not getting carded because, I developed really early, and so, it was easy for me to bypass these different things.
He found out that I went to a coworker's party. It was my friend's coworker's party, and he found out I was there, and he was out with his friends. So he called me and he asked where I was, and I told him, and he flipped out on me. And on the phone, he was screaming, and he was, telling me he's gonna break up with me, and I had no business being at a party, and that I had better go over to where he was. I'd better get my ass over to his friend's house.
An example of the financial abuse, it was expected on me to pay all of the bills. He was not in a financial position to where he could, and I knew that going in. But me being a person who always thought I could fix or help or wanted to help, I didn't see that as abuse. I saw that as me just contributing my part to the relationship. It put me in such a financial situation that when I did leave, I ended up having to file bankruptcy. So the way that it ended up being into a physical altercation, and not only that, he would rape me at night, he'd wait till I take my medication, things of that nature. The abuse started long before the hitting did, but it wasn't until the hitting happened that I realized that I was in a serious situation, and that it was going to be a little bit harder to leave than what I expected.
And then I drove him home that night, and driving home, we parked the car in front of his apartment, and he said, I like to have control in my relationships, and so that's just part of how, of how it's going to go. And I didn't know what to think, but I knew I loved him. I knew that I really liked him. I knew I was falling in love with him, so I accepted it. And I was in shock too. It didn't hit me. It was just like, okay. And I knew he had been drinking. Drinking was a big thing with him. And so that was, within the first month of us being together.
One time I tried to leave and go visit that aunt who lived 45 minutes away, and I was going to disclose to her that I was in a dangerous situation. He caught me in the garage. The verbal abuse came first, and then the threats, and then the pushing and the shoving, and needless to say, I went back in the house. I called my aunt and I told her I couldn't make it out.
If I slept over at his apartment, he would keep me up. If I didn't want to have sex, he would keep me up, and until I did. So he would just not let me go to sleep.
At the beginning, it was like a honeymoon. You fall in love with a person, and you don't know what's gonna happen until something happens. I was with this person for a long time, but the first 2 weeks, he got me by the neck and put me against the wall.
He would just pick me up because he was so big. He was 6'5". He would pick me up and drag me back in, or jump in my car if I tried to leave. There's a lot of me trying to run away from him and jumping in my car and like taking my keys away. He took my keys away a lot, especially when I tried to like leave. Or he would take his shirt off and ball it around his fist and stand there and say, "I'm gonna punch your windows if you try and leave."
I was at his house, and, we were around family, children were there, and, we were just having a good time. Things were, stable at the moment. And so, we thought, hey, let's have some fun. And so we're, going at it and we're wrestling. I'm a very competitive person. I like to win. So along with this activity, I got a little too into it. And I pinned him, which is something that I've never been able to do before because he's way bigger than me. And so his reaction was to immediately grab me by my arms and throw me against the wall. And I remember just being against the wall and thinking, what is he going to do next? Is he going to hit me in front of all these people? What's that going to look like? And he's just staring at me, making sure that I'm scared, making sure that I'm intimidated. And he leans into my ear and he whispers, "If you ever try to do that again, I will kill you."
He was mad at me, and my friend was there, and it really put my friend in danger. And he proceeded to sit there and was like yelling at me in my face. I was sitting in a chair, and he was just like in my face, just yelling, like hunched over. And then he was on the first floor of an apartment building, so they have like those gates, that gate and on your balcony, your first floor balcony. So I was trying to get away from him. So like usual, we would wrestle. And I ended up wrestling, and he ended up wrestling me to the floor, and I came back up. I didn't have a top on. I didn't have a bra. I had nothing. And I was standing there, and he's like, "What the hell?" And he like threw my clothes at me. And I put my clothes on, and I told my friend Brianna, I was like, "Just get my purse." And I said, "Go to the front." I was like yelling at her, and so she did. And I tried to climb back over like the little balcony. I was trying to climb, and as I did, he basically, like a rag doll, he took me and like slammed me against the fence and dragged me back over.
The last time he beat me, he also burned my house. We had split up, and then he went over to ask me for money so he could buy some beer and cigarettes. And I said no. That was it. We weren't together no more. So I got up, and he dragged me by the hair through the living room to the bedroom. And my son was 15 by then. He got the bat and hit him with the bat, and then he let me go. We all ran out. He burned my house as we ran out.